Buon anno, tutti. Welcome back. I feel like this is a podcast episode that needs to start with a previously on Serie A Chronicles, because we are back. Mina and I are back for Serie A. Mina, what was this nonsense we've been putting up with for the last 2 months? Some other kind of football that isn't the real thing, isn't the genuine article that we've been pining for. Italian football, Serie A. And we're back in the room with quite a game this midweek, which we'll get to in just a second. But first of all, Mina, Happy New Year. How was your New Year's Eve?
Hi, Nicky. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit depressed to be back. I kind of still want to be in my bubble of sleeping in and, eating lots of food and not knowing what day it is, But normal life has resumed and now it's the countdown to summer. This is how I plan my life. The countdown to summer.
I feel that. I don't know how it is where you are, but like today's actually been a really sunny day down here, which probably is bad news for the world and stuff. But it was really nice going for a walk now. And I did feel like, oh, we've turned that corner. It's not cold and dark anymore. It's going to get sunnier. It's going to get nicer. I'm with you on that. There's Simon, our producer Simon in Australia, laughing to himself at our European misery.
Our European misery. Exactly that, And not only that, even though it is sunny, even over here in London, for us, the countdown means that we might just have a little bit more sunlight after 4 p.m.
Yes.
This is what it is in England, It's otherwise the sun has been setting at quarter to 4, 3:45 or stuff. So now we just have a little bit extra minutes and we sort of enjoy that. Absolutely. What do you mean the real football?
A little note just dropped into our running order document from producer Simon. 33 degrees where he is. For some.
Go away.
It's...
Although actually, I'm not sure I would want it to be that hot over here.
Listen, Mina, you ask what the real football is, and I say the real football is the kind of football that has Italian talent in it, the likes of Nicola Barella, the likes of Nicola Zaniolo, the sort of players who were conspicuously absent from our screens over the last 2 months. And look, I'm going to get to the point because I think if we're going to do where we're up to, there's no question what the biggest game is to come back to. It's a huge game to kick off the season. I don't know if it would be cynical to say they did it deliberately, but they couldn't have deliberately scheduled a much bigger game to come back to than Inter against Napoli, the champions of 2 seasons ago, against the team that is running away with Serie A right now. To remind everyone very quickly, the top of Serie A looks like this. Napoli, first place, 41 points. They are now the only team across Europe's top 5 leagues that is still unbeaten after Paris Saint-Germain lost the other day. So Napoli, top of the league on 41 points. They have a massive 8-point lead over Milan in second. Juventus, another 2 points back, so 10 points off the lead in third. Extraordinary when you think where they were, how far back they were at the start of the season. Lazio and Inter currently joint fourth on 30 points, and Atalanta and Roma behind them. So look, Napoli are running away with it at the moment, but the group behind them is actually really, really close together. So from Milan in second all the way down to Roma in seventh, there's a total of 6 points between them. So a really, really close race behind Napoli. And if anything could liven up this start to the new year and make the title race come back into the sort of sharper focus, it would be Inter upsetting Napoli in this first game back. Mina, I know it's not a World Cup. I know it's not Messi against Mbappe, but it's pretty exciting.
You know what it is? You remind me of Lukaku coming back with a vengeance, trying to yeah, Serie A's back. I'm going to prove it again. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to show you guys how good this is, And you know who I am? I'm Paul Pogba after he won the World Cup, where everything's just miserable because I've already achieved everything I wanted to achieve. Except I haven't, but I am one of those people that's like, oh God, I have to start doing this all over again. And you forget, right? Like, this is how I felt like when Serie A ended and the World Cup started. I was depressed. I was like, it was just so
You
good. Like,
were.
we were on such a high. Like, it was just so amazing. The games were so fun to watch. And it was like this stupid thing that's interrupted this wonderful season of football. And the stupid thing ended up being like my favorite thing. And then like, ugh. Anyway, then again, what happened?
I mean, look, the World Cup was extraordinary. We've picked over it in all its different aspects. There were some problems with it that were very difficult, and the football itself was brilliant. Was my feeling about it. But one thing that I will say is, as brilliant as that football was, up until that World Cup came along, I was enjoying watching this Napoli team about as much as I've enjoyed watching any team in Europe in a really long time. They are brilliant fun to watch. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, of course, one of the stories of the season, Kvaradonna and his emergence. Victor Osimhen, who's been playing, raised his game again from last season, playing at a level that we haven't seen from him before. Andre Frank Zamba and Guisa, who suddenly scores goals as well as being just brilliant in that midfield and dominating things. Even Mario Rui, who I've been pretty sort of low on compared to some people, is having an extraordinary season. This team has been really fun to watch. So I'm excited to see them come back. And I also think that of all the teams for them to go up against in the first game back, Inter will not make it easy. Inter have not been at Napoli's level for this season. We can say that. That's pretty clear. But they have still got through the Champions League group stage, knocked out Barcelona. They've had some games this season where they've made you go, okay, this team's got something about it. They finished last year with a 3-2 win away to Atalanta. Before that, they thumped Bologna 6-1. This Inter team are not as good as they were when they won the title under Antonio Conte, but they're not a team that anyone, not even this Napoli, can take for granted.
No, absolutely not. Actually, when I think of the highlights of sort of the beginning of the season, for me, it is obviously Napoli. Like, you can't get away from like the brilliance of their game, and also the brilliance of Spalletti. Like, if there's anyone who really deserves to have his moment, it is Spalletti. Like, just the way that he's organized his team, the way that everyone thought this was going to be a season in which like they were just lots of changes, so many veterans leaving. It's going to need to take time. What a brilliant job he's doing and continues to do. And now there's a potential, obviously, that he'll even add Unahi, who had a terrific time with Morocco at the World Cup, to the team. I mean, this team is stacked, and my God, how good they are at scouting talent. But actually, one of the highlights for me was Udinese's run as well. I loved watching them. For me, they were like this really fun side after the 70th minute. It's like you never knew what was going to happen with Udinese. Yeah. But my favorite moments were frankly Inter in the Champions League. Like, that gave me so much emotions that it made me like, even though the Champions League was miserable as a Juventus fan, Inter made the Champions League really fun for me. Like, it was just that. Those matches were exhilarating to watch, especially the second one with Barcelona when it was all tied, and then there was that great chance missed. And, they were just so fantastic. So I really hope that when it comes to the Champions League, the Italian teams will do well, even though Juventus is out. There's still 3 remaining, and we're all behind them, hopefully. So there's been like some really great moments, I've got to say, and I'm sort of excited to get back to that. But you're right, I am. Inter are no easy team. For me, I thought they were odds-on favourite to win the Serie A title for sure at the start of the season. And we spoke about that. I didn't think Napoli would be anywhere near the top. I mean, I thought maybe 4th at most, just because of the changes. But the thing that worries me, obviously, with Inter is their goal scoring. And even though, like you pointed out in the last edition of the Qatar Chronicles, that Lautaro Martinez, is one of the reasons why they ended up winning the final, He didn't have a terrific World Cup. I still think that he's going to be on a high because they did lift the trophy, and he's part of that, and he contributed to that. So he needs to, to get his just desserts as well. But neither him nor Lukaku had a terrific World Cup in terms of goal scoring. And so that is perhaps something to worry about going forward. Napoli seem a little bit perhaps more well-rested in that sense. A lot of their players came back quite early. Osimhen never went, obviously. So you just hope that he's going to still be, doing everything that he needs to do alongside Cavaradonna, because he said that's his favorite nickname. So we're going to go with that now. Kvaratskhelia or Cavaradonna. So it's going to be a really interesting match, but I still believe that Napoli is going to go all the way and just win every single match, or be at least undefeated, because they are just this team that I don't even think that this 1.5 months out is really going to disturb their momentum. What do you think?
I'm gonna peel back the curtain here. I think I'm allowed to say this. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble. So the Guardian do their top 100 footballers, men's football and women's footballers every year. The women's football has already gone up. The men's football it's a bit late this year because of the World Cup. So they're doing it in January. So they're doing it in December. And one of my sort of jobs in the background is to make a long list of Serie A players, basically that gets shared with all the judges, because I guess it's sort of like a memory aid for judges, because we have a lot of judges in the panel from all over the world, and not all of them watch as much Serie A. So you're giving them a little memory aid by doing a long list of players you might consider from Serie A if you need a little memory bump. And honestly, like, just doing that long list, and you make a little couple of notes for each player, and just remembering everything about this Napoli team, it's been like such an exciting like reminder of how good they've been. Like I just think, I've already sort of raved about some of them, but there's just so much in this team that's so exciting. And you think about, I do think part of the excitement in Serie A this season has stemmed, as you said, Mina, from how good some of the Champions League performances have been, because also there was that Napoli win over Liverpool, which at the time, it's easy to look back now and say, well, Liverpool haven't been that great. But it was extraordinary when Liverpool came to Naples, and they didn't just beat them, they thrashed them. They really sort of put them to the sword. Yeah, Ajax completely wiped them away. And it is Victor Osimhen being this joyful, irresistible force who I don't even know how you're supposed to defend against him. The sort of the power and explosiveness combined to just physically being so long in the way he can use his limbs, but then also having that exceptional close control and keeping it so tight, and somehow being able to maintain that with his balance. He's an extraordinary technical footballer.
It's like that sheer desire. Like, he's got to get the goal. Like, his life depends on getting the goal. Like,
yes,
it's so rare to see that, like this, like, mad obsession with it. Oh, I love it.
Absolutely. And then you combine that with Kvaratskhelia, who's just unpredictability in a bottle, right? Like, you just don't know what he's going to do. Zielinski, who can play those passes so well, and the Book can do the same. And then Anguissa, who can carry the ball forward. Everything about this team is so exciting. And then you think, okay, and then off the bench, when you want them, Raspadori, Simeone, both of whom have scored a surprising number of goals.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. It's funny that when you talked about Inter, then on the other side of it, you sort of talked about the goal scoring, and instinctively I think, well, yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. Lautaro has these long dry spells. The only goal he scored at the World Cup was in a penalty shootout. He didn't score in the whole World Cup. Lukaku didn't play a lot of the World Cup, in truth. I think he played about an hour in total because he's just back from injury. But look, when did we last see Lukaku in the sort of swaggering Lukaku mold that we did before? It's been a long time. But then the truth of it is, Mina, that actually there's only one team in all of Serie A that scored more goals than Inter, and that's Napoli. That's it. No one else has scored more than Inter. Inter's problem is they've also conceded 22 goals in 15 games. So Inter's actual sort of measurable problem is at the other end. And honestly, like, my sort of expectation for this game, and there's so much like who knows about this game, right? Because the teams have been away, because these players are just getting back together after a long time apart, because some players aren't going to play after the World Cup. I mean, Brozovic got back earlier than Lautaro, but I think he's been training apart, so he's not expected to play in midfield for Inter. I don't know if Lautaro's going to be ready to go up front for them. There are some important players missing. But if you were to tell me, like, the two teams before the break, what they were playing like, I would expect this game to be just fireworks end to end, because Inter can't defend, and so they have to go forward. And Napoli are devastatingly brilliant going forward. So I think this could be a brilliant game, but there's always that risk that it's not because of the rust. Yeah, definitely.
I don't think Inter is going to go gung-ho. I think they're going to close up and counter.
Okay.
Oh, that's going to be so interesting that you think that. Oh, I don't know which one's going to be right now. I just thought that they would try to do something similar to what they did to Barcelona and sort of give the keys to Napoli and see if they can. I mean, they're not great defensively, you're right about that, but maybe if they closed their lines and it was something they worked on,
They shouldn't be terrible defensively. Like, they've still got the same back three that was good defensively previously. They've still got, well, I think if Brozovic is out, that's a big loss there.
Yeah.
I think it's classic Brozovic. He got back to training early and he was supposed to, but yeah, it sounds like he's been training apart these last couple of days. So unless he feels ready to go, it's going to be hard for him to come back in. I think if you defend against this Napoli, you lose. So you kind of have to be brave and play but we'll see. I don't know. I'm really excited for this game. I think if you were going to, I actually think if you're going to give me any Serie A game to come back from the World Cup, this might be the one. Not that I'm saying Inter are better than the other title challengers. I'm not saying that Inter are better than Milan. They're better than Juventus. I just think they're going to give Napoli a more interesting game. And I think the other thing that's fun about this game, which is just inevitable, right, is these two managers have had 2 months to obsess about this game.
Yeah.
Like, they've had 2 months to sit there and go, oh, it's going to be that game to come back to. I've got to get it right. And actually quite a lot of the key players weren't at the World Cup. Osimhen wasn't at the World Cup. Kvaratskhelia wasn't at the World Cup. Barella wasn't at the World Cup. There's a lot of players who they've had time to work with to get ready for it. And I don't know. I'm excited. I hope it's as good a game as I'm billing it as, because I think it could be a really good one.
Can we get your prediction?
I'm going to say 3-2 to Napoli.
Wow, you think it's going to be that open?
I do. What do you think, Mina?
1-0 to Napoli. I don't know why I think it's going to be a close game. That's so interesting. Oh my God. I'm actually dying to watch it now just to see everything. I do think it'll be a 1-0. I don't know why I think it's going to be a cagey affair, just because it's the first one back. So I don't know which way it's going to go, but I really, really do hope that it's a 3-2 because it will be so much fun to.
Mina, there's another very important festive tradition that we now recognise every year in Italy. It's that special time of year when Romelu Lukaku speaks to Sky Sports and tells them how much he loves Inter. He did it last year when he was at Chelsea, but he's done it again. He's actually at Inter now. Says that he would like to stay beyond the end of this loan deal. Not a surprise to anyone, I don't think. No one expects him to want to go back to Chelsea. Although I think he's played 4 games for Inter so far because of his injuries. He says he's back and he's healthy now. So obviously, in terms of what happens on the pitch, we'll see. I think everyone probably hopes that he now has a good second half of the season because it strengthens everyone's position, strengthens Inter's position, strengthens Chelsea's position for selling him, strengthens Lukaku's position. But yes, Mina, did you enjoy Lukaku doing his annual love letter to Inter and the Inter fans?
It just, look, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say this. I sort of like that he likes his club so much, but I can't help but think it's, okay, like, let's just imagine you have a boyfriend that's like, only into you because the really hot girl turned you away. I don't know how to explain. That's how I feel, I just feel like he had all these grand ambitions of being like, well, he did think he was, top level 5 striker, and everything was always going to be a step up until he could fortify that position and that image in the fans' head that he was that guy that, oh, if Harry Kane was doing this, you would be talking about me in the same breath as you would be talking about all these great number 9s. And then it sort of didn't work out. And I was like, oh, I love you guys. I never wanted to leave. And it was just all a misunderstanding. And I come here every Christmas time to reaffirm my absolute adoration for this club and my total respect for your fans. And there's a part of me that thinks maybe he really does mean it. And there's a part of me that's just like, don't keep saying it, because when you keep saying it, it keeps reminding me that you did this thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that you did this thing when you left and you came back because you didn't fulfill the ambitions that you thought you could fulfill. I'm somebody where if you do something wrong to me, don't keep apologizing because you're just going to remind me of that thing you do. Just have your pride and be, well, this is what I tried to do and this is what I achieved. Oh, Lukaku. don't know how I'm ever going to feel about this guy. But he needs to really show a lot in this next 6 months, because, you know, I do feel sorry for him in the sense that he came back and he really wanted to be this power player, and it didn't go to plan, obviously, because of injuries. But I mean, you also can't get away from the fact that he did put on weight while he was at Chelsea, that he didn't come back in the perfect condition, and that right now he doesn't have the fitness manager that he did under Conte. So it is a little bit harder for him to sort of regain or be used properly, I think, because what Inzaghi is a proper tactician in the sense that everything's about the game. Whereas I think when you're working with Pintus, as Conte was, you get told what are the best things about each player, and then you sort of work around it, you know? And he doesn't have that at the moment. So it's like having to play as part of the team, and he could really excel or not. So I'm interested to see what he's going to be able to do. But Lukaku's just Lukaku. I know you like him a little bit more than I do.
I do. I like him as a footballer. I slightly enjoy this. I mean, it does feel very transparent. It does feel very transparent. Like, you know, you've gone away, you've been somewhere else, it didn't work out, and now you're like, I think you phrased it well, Mina. It is a bit like the spurned boyfriend is now like really trying to say the right things and do the right things. You know, we'll see. We'll see. I think he's got a big role to play right out the gate this year. By all accounts, he is fit now and thinks he's ready to start. Lautaro obviously just back from Argentina. It's probably Lukaku and Dzeko who start up front, I would guess, against Napoli. And, you know, that's an interesting partnership. It's a very sort of powerful partnership in terms of like physical stature. They're very different players. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I think it's probably a more interesting sort of bigger conversation, Mina, like players that are going to come back from the World Cup and how we think that will impact them. There was a few Serie A players who had quite notable World Cups. I mean, I'm not sure that there's any individual who stood out for me more than actually Sofiane Amrabat with Morocco, who I would never have guessed he would have a tournament that sort of impressive, but he really was brilliant. And how much of that will he carry back for Fiorentina? Let me just consult my sheet a second. Fiorentina, who start at home to Monza in the new year. But also, if we look at Juventus, who start away to Cremonese, Di Maria wasn't even there for every game, but when he was on the pitch was brilliant for Argentina. And can he bring some of that back to Juventus? Because he had a bit of a mixed start at Juventus, didn't he?
Do you think Paredes will bring all that anger back to you? And start kicking footballs at the other benches?
And what about Rabiot as well? Rabiot was brilliant at the World Cup.
Rabiot is playing lights out. Like, it's really scaring me, to be honest with you. Like, there's a part of me that's like, please don't go. Like, I want you to stay forever. And I can't believe that I'm saying that about it. But there's also another part of me where, I mean, if you listen to recent reports, basically, Juventus have entered into negotiations to try to extend his contract now with his mother, Veronique. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, that's excellent. Another part of me is like, all of this is for the contract, isn't it? You know, you're going to get that contract extension. You're going to go back to being Rabiot, who doesn't really care, you know? And you're sort of in two minds about this player, because you don't understand how for so many years you never see him fulfill that potential. You always knew it was there. There was no way that you didn't know that Rabiot was talented, you know? But it was almost like he just didn't give you all of him, and there was always something missing. And look, in his defense, he has had, you know, like a lot of coaching changes, perhaps, you know, never really found his perfect role, but he's also been poor. He's been poor. And to have the season that he's having now for Juventus, and then take that as well and do that in France, wow. I think Rabiot is going to come back with a point to prove, because, you know, at the end of the day, he did lose the World Cup. And I always feel like when you lose a World Cup, you want the games to come because you want to sort of prove yourself again, and you want to win a trophy again, because it's all about the next game. Whereas when you've already won, like Di Maria, there's a part of you that, like what Pogba said, you know, and I'll always remember that. It's kind of like, I achieved the goal. Like, now it's just, I've got to start this all over again. You know, I've got to pump myself up. I've got to motivate myself. I've got to be angry. I've got to be like determined, but I've already done it. So do I need to, you know? So that worries me about Di Maria. Vlahovic's injury worries me. Not that, you know, I've always been his biggest fan, but he is obviously like the best striker that Juventus have, right? So I'm interested to see how that's all going to work back. also with Federico Chiesa, right? We've been waiting for this guy for so long. What's going to happen? He didn't play some of the friendlies. Everyone was a little bit worried he's still injured. Juve is an interesting prospect right now because I want to see how the team reacts to everything that happened, obviously, in the boardroom. And also that they do have a nice, I guess they do have French players and they do have Argentinian players. So it'll be interesting to compare and contrast who did well for that. Other players, was Giroud in Milan. You just imagine Giroud will always be Giroud, right? And they're not that dependent on what happened in the World Cup. But Juventus had too many players there. So it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was just thinking the situation at Juventus is still working its way through courts and sporting courts, and I'm just trying to think where we last updated our listeners on that and whether there's more we need to say about exactly where that's up to.
I think we should.
In terms of,
yeah,
I was going to say, in terms of practical impact, one thing that seems very likely is that I can't imagine Juventus is going to be spending much money this January. So I think that they're going to be working with what they've got and maybe even some sort of outgoings, because one thing that certainly seems clear and in the wiretaps and what's come out is there was some pretty creative accounting being done to get everyone in they wanted to get in, Vlahovic being a major case. Sort of, this is not saying specifically about legality or not legality, just doing things with the books to make sure that there's enough to justify making a sign like that is part of the picture. So there is a lot that's unknown with this Juventus team. There is Paul Pogba, who there was some positive reporting about him having some sort of pain-free days and that being an encouraging thing, but we're still not really that close. It doesn't feel like to see him on a football pitch. There's Chiesa, as you already mentioned. What's he going to look like after what's basically been a full year out of football? And then Di Maria, I mentioned already, had a very odd start to this season, had a couple of good games, but also missed a lot of games. And it sometimes felt like he was at odds with Massimiliano Allegri. And with hindsight, there's that thought in your head of how much was he just stalling for time because frankly his focus was on the World Cup. I think that was true for some players, that what mattered to them the last few months was not getting hurt before the World Cup.
You had the stories about Griezmann as well.
Yeah.
And then, all
Absolutely.
of a sudden he's lights out in France. Where was that for Atletico, So yes, I do agree with you. There are some players who've been sort of, with playing with the handbrake on, waiting for this World Cup. So now that's over. And also it is over. Does he have the motivation to prove himself anymore? Does he have the motivation to do something for a team that he's only there for another 6 months and nothing more? That these things worry me, going forward. I also feel a little bit sorry for Fiorentina because every winter they have to deal with like a major player that everyone wants now. It was Vlahovic last winter. Now everyone wants Sofyan Amrabat, who they probably never thought was going to be like this hot topic, And now everyone's sort of talking about where's he going to be next, and then they have to deal with how much money they want for him. In terms of Juventus and I guess where we left off, they are being. This sort of irritates me because I did want to talk about it. And I'm sure you guys read that Walter Sabatini came out and said that he felt a little bit like, what was the word that he used? I always forget the word he used. Was it, let's just say hard done by, because I'm paraphrasing here, by what happened in the 2016-2017 season. Because he referred to Roma finishing not in first place, despite getting 87 points, and he felt a little bit cheated, referring to obviously the situation that's happening at Juventus. And reading the stuff, it's just like this is the thing that happens in Italian football. Everyone loves to jump on a bandwagon and automatically start making some things dramatic. Firstly, they're not being investigated for that season. Secondly, you should know wherever Beppe Maronte is, it's probably safe sailing, And during that time, there was no COVID pandemic. Even the judge in Turin, looking at the case, has said that this probably would not have would have happened had there not been a pandemic, referring to the fact that these cases and everything that's happened to Italian football suffering is a lot to do with what happened during that season. And this was also, before Ronaldo, before lots of money being paid out, And it's also the season that Juventus won 2 trophies and reached the final of the Champions League. So you're saying you felt cheated because you didn't win over that team Like, it's just extraordinary to think that you cannot for a second think that it could just be like, that Roma weren't maybe as good as Juventus that season. But you instead have chosen to jump on that bandwagon to sort of legitimize your work at the club. And I think that's extraordinary. And people will obviously listen to this and say, well, you're a Juventus fan and you're obviously going to say that. But this is a Roma side that didn't even make it through the playoff rounds of the Champions League, that they had to go to the Europa League, were knocked out in the last 16 of the Europa League, that had a full season to play one game a week. And yeah, maybe that does put them in a better position. And, even if it is money, money has always been a factor. Juventus have always made more money. And, so as many other teams, Inter will always make more money. You cannot possibly turn around and say that is the difference and they cheated you out of winning that. At the end of the day, you can say that when it was Calciopoli and there was refereeing. Maybe you could say that, You cannot say that when the team just spends more money. And these types of things is what I think holds back just Calcio in general, because when other people read this, they're going to believe what you just said, and then they're going to think something about Italian football. And we're never going to get rid of this sort of reputation that Italian football now has on it, as a corrupt league where everyone's just always feeling cheated because there's always one or two shady teams doing some weird, dodgy back deals. And, at the end of the day, when other teams have done this and have come up and been able to prove their legitimacy and prove their innocence, like Manchester City, like Paris Saint-Germain, no one says anything, right? But in Italian football, you have just a bunch of people that keep coming out and dragging the reputations of others down. Anyway, that's my little 2 cents worth on what Walter Sabatini did, because it really irritated me reading what he had to say. Anyway, I'm
just sad that in amongst those comments, we lost the other part of that interview with Sabatini, which is him talking about Napoli. He said, Napoli play an erotic football, sensual, very close to eroticism. That was his phrasing. That was how he described Napoli's football.
I feel like this guy thinks he's on he's performing for La Scala or something. Like, I don't understand. Do you remember last year when Spalletti was talking about the heavens and the world and getting into really weird metaphors to explain things, and you're like, stop it. Like, no wonder him and Sabatini work so well. They're just both living in another planet where they think this is a fantasy and a Greek tragedy being played out. Like, guys, it's just like this. This is where you can see, where you can see the Allegri in me, where it's like, it's just a football game. This is all it is, It's just 11 guys kicking a ball.
I'm here for the metaphors. I think that's part of the love of Italian football, is the nonsense. Right. What else? Do you know, there was actually a question I'm going to read out belatedly, because actually I felt we've already started answering it, but we meant to go through this question from Chronicles Tifoso, Giancarlo Anese. Thank you so much for sending this in, Giancarlo. Giancarlo wrote, hello, the Qatar Chronicles were a great way to get different perspective to here in the US. The coverage here didn't really look beyond the obvious storylines. Well, we're glad you enjoyed it. I'm wondering if you have a few Serie A players in particular you'll be watching to see how they do after the break. Do you think some who either didn't get to go or who had poor performances will come back on fire for their clubs with something to prove? Do you think anyone who did well might have a bit of a hangover? We've already started answering this, Mina. You were talking about whether or not the French players come back with a fire underneath them. We haven't really mentioned Milan, who of course have a couple of players from that French team. They've got Theo Hernandez, who did not show off his best side in some games at the tournament. His defensive weakness is very much exposed in a couple of games. And then of course Olivier Giroud, who did have a good tournament, and I think there's zero chance of Giroud being changed by it, because I think Giroud is just Giroud, isn't he? He shows up and plays his game always, and did at the World Cup. I don't know if there's anyone else in particular who we haven't already talked about, Mina, from the World Cup, who you think is worth.
Well, I do wonder how Rafael Leao, because there's a lot on his shoulder at the moment. He obviously wasn't starting for Portugal, but when he did come, he always made an impact, right? Which sort of begged the question, why wasn't he starting certain matches? But it is a Portuguese side full of talent up front, so I understand that there is a need to balance it all out. Depending to what the opposition had, or I do think that he probably should have started against Morocco. Nonetheless, obviously this is an important month, because he seems to be a little bit more towards wanting to stay at Milan. They are trying to push in order to offer him a bigger salary and one that's closer to his expectations, something around the 7 million mark, which is a lot for Milan at the moment to do that. The question, I guess, is because he is being heavily followed now by Manchester City and Chelsea. They are watching him. They are very, very interested in him. And he's one of those, last greats and true wingers. So he's a necessity for a lot of teams. My question is, if you are Milan and you know that he has that debt hanging over from Sporting, so if you don't know, he terminated his contract with Sporting because of a situation that happened in which the dressing room was broken into at the time, and fans were really angry with what was going on at the club, and a lot of players had terminated their contract. He obviously moved to France, and then that's where Milan bought him. But he has a debt, I think it's around the 16.5 million mark on top. And so they do have to deal with that because he wants to reach a conclusion with the club about paying that. He obviously doesn't want to pay that. So, and he doesn't need to because he is a star and he knows he'll find a club that will be willing to sort of offload that debt for him. So if you're Milan, what do? Do you try to scout someone else, or do you go all in on this player who is fantastic? But as Gazzetta said, does he have the determination to be their number one star in the good and the bad for a growing team?
Yeah,
it is that fire, right? He's so good when he switches it on, but there's so many times where he doesn't, and it's getting better. I'm not saying he's becoming more and more consistent, but there are moments where you just wonder, where is Leao, and are they too dependent on Leao? Of course, that doesn't mean you strip the team of like the person that they are dependent on, so that they, but what do you do if you're Milan and your funds are limited?
Yeah, I mean that's a question which I think lots of Europe is wrestling with, frankly, but certainly lots of the big Italian clubs are wrestling with, is how to make things work with financial realities, especially post COVID, of not being able to just sort of go out there and throw money around. And I think Leao's a really interesting case. I love him as a footballer. I've said that lots of times on this show, but I always think about when I interviewed Stefano Pioli and he said, we talked about how Leao always has that smile on his face, and he's like, you see like mischief on him, like he's smiling as he's running past people. And Pioli sort of saying, well, that bothered me, to be honest with you, for quite a long time. And it's almost like he felt like he wasn't taking it seriously enough somehow. And it's an interesting perspective, but he's played 12 games for Serie A in Serie A this season, 6 goals, 4 assists. It's a pretty solid return, isn't it? He's doing the job. So we shall see. Definitely, I think you're right. Another one who had an interesting World Cup. I agree with you. I thought against Morocco, if you're not going to start Ronaldo, I think they could have made room for him. Ronaldo, obviously a whole different story that perhaps isn't quite so Serie A related, although still extraordinary to think, though, the speed of his, I don't know if downfall is the right word, but I can't think of a better one in the moment. The speed of his sort of journey from being the man at Real Madrid to Juventus in €100 million transfer. And then you go back to Manchester imagining it's going to be some sort of glorious late career chapter. And instead, a year later, he's off to Saudi Arabia, where I really don't mean this to be disrespectful to any league. He'll, I'm sure, be greatly enjoyed over there, but it's not the pinnacle of competitiveness for a footballer to play in that league, and that sort of coming off the back of a World Cup where he didn't even get to start every game for Portugal feels extraordinary. But perhaps that's too big of a side note to move into right now.
Wait, can I just say something quickly on that?
Do. Yeah.
I do think that a lot of people are saying, oh, look at this, the culmination of Messi's career ends with him lifting the trophy. And then, poor Ronaldo is basically like going to Saudi Arabia after crying in the World Cup. And I just really want to point out, because it does make a difference, that he is older than Messi by a good 2 years. At the end of the day, like at 37, it is much harder to be doing all the things that he's doing. And I do think that he came back to Manchester United and he was their top scorer last season. So it's not like he failed. It just is that the team is going in a direction in which he can't be really the main man. And it didn't work out for him. But I don't think in any way he let himself down. And I do sort of disagree with some of the criticisms aimed. I know he wanted to finish at the top level. He is 37. I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you offer me 200 million now and I can turn on the heating, I'm going.
It does cost about that much to turn on the heating. My goodness, I put my latest electricity and gas meter readings in yesterday, and I got a bit of an unpleasant shock. Wow.
Just to give you guys some prospect, it's 176 on average per month in Poland for gas and electricity. In the UK, it's about 5 times more than any European country. We're talking about on average is 2,500. Like, can you just see the difference? Simon just looks really shocked.
It's really jumped up a lot. It's a bit terrifying, honestly, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yes, it is.
Hey, sign up to our page. Mostly joking. Also, everyone who's listening now is already a Patreon. So thank you all, in fact, because everyone who's here at this point in the podcast is already supporting us, and we really do appreciate it. Like we say it enough, but I love getting to do these shows with Mina, and yeah, we appreciate you giving us a chance to do that.
Yeah,
Mina, I think we've been going for a while. Is there any other business that we haven't got to? There's lots of teams we haven't talked about. I'll just sort of quickly sort of run through the fixtures for this midweek round. We've got Salernitana against Milan, Sassuolo Sampdoria, Spezia Atalanta, Torino Verona, Lecce against Lazio, Roma Bologna, Cremonese Juventus, Fiorentina against Monza, Inter against Napoli, and Udinese against Empoli. We've already talked about the big game in that list. It's pretty obvious what it is. The midweek that's the midweek. Obviously, that's Wednesday night. There's another big game coming up on Sunday. Milan against Roma is the Sunday night game. I think
Milan Salernitana is going to be
out.
fun. Milan Salernitana. Yes.
Well, Salernitana, there's a lot of talk about some interesting things with them this January transfer window. I literally, as I was preparing to come on here, saw Isco to Salernitana being the latest rumour. So, goodness,
good little team.
That could be fun. Yeah.
Who sacked Walter Sabatini? So I like them even more now. Joking. No, but they are just this team that you don't know what they're going to pull out the hat. They're either going to be miserable or they're going to be just wonderful. So they are just this unpredictable, you know what they are? They're Kvaratskhelia, but in a team form. No, just not as good. Nowhere near, actually. I think that's pretty much all we have time for, but we will be back. We will do some voice notes just to update you on some of the midweek matches, and then we will be back next Monday with our installment. Thank you so much to all of you who do continue to support us. As Nicky has already stated, we really do appreciate having you on board and listening to us. You can always find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini, at Mina Rzouki. Follow Serie A Chronicles on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And we'll be back with the latest edition next week. Cross your fingers. Ciao.
Serie A Chronicles is a Serie A Chronicles production.